It's been 10 days since the Great March through Paris, where more than 1 million Frenchmen stood in defiance of Muslim terrorists. Many of them carried signs saying, "Je suis Charlie," I am Charlie, as in Charlie Hebdo, the satirical magazine where 12 people were murdered for daring to publish an image of Mohammed. So that was 10 days ago. The spirit of free speech and freedom of the press and the right to offend people with thin skin, the right to mock anyone and certainly any idea or ideology. But then yesterday, the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, threatened to sue Fox News Channel in the United States because she didn't like the way Fox covered the terrorist attacks. So the bold, freedom-loving princess who 10 days ago was calling for free speech and the right to offend whiners, especially the right to offend threatening whiners, this champion of journalists and their freedoms was yesterday making a dramatic display of how offended she was, whining and threatening to censor journalists herself, who said something she didn't like. I wish I were joking.
I think we'll have to sue. I think we'll have to go to court in order to have these words removed. The image of Paris has been prejudiced, and the honor of Paris have been prejudiced. And I think in the great discussion of truth, everyone is to play its role, and we are going to have to be realistic and put things as they are.
Can you clarify which exact network you're going to take to court and sue?
C'est la Fox News. Fox News.
Yeah, first of all, it's just embarrassing for the mayor of a great city, an ancient city of 2 million people, the capital of France, to be whining and obsessed by some comments made on a talk show across the ocean. I mean, either she's faking it or she has some serious confidence issues. I think she's faking it. She's certainly faking the law part. A city can't sue because its mayor is mad about press coverage. I mean, that's the thing about defamation laws. They apply to individual people, not to cities or countries or religions or philosophies or ideologies. And defamation isn't just about insults. I think she's talking about some Sharia law concept, not a French concept, certainly nothing that would fly in the United States with its First Amendment, which is where Fox is. But forget the legal quackery here, the junk law, the make-it-up-as-you-go unseriousness. That's not the point. The point is her instincts to censor and silence people she finds troublesome, especially journalists, especially in this case, journalists who point out how deep France's troubles are with its Muslim population of 10 million, much of which is poorly integrated and unemployed, and a dangerous number of whom are finding meaning in the Islamic Jihad. Yeah, she wants to censor Fox because Fox embarrasses her honor, she said, by pointing out the problems in the city she runs. Now, I want to talk about this in two ways. The first is the most important, how Western leaders who should be strengthening our culture of liberty and free speech are internalizing the enemy's philosophy by becoming censors ourselves. It's like they've got Stockholm Syndrome or something. They're taking on themselves the ideas of our enemies. Yes, of course, they're not censoring with AK-47s like terrorists did at Charlie Hebdo. They want to censor through lawfare, through slap suits, strategic litigation against public participation, the kind of thing that Saudi Arabia and more than 50 other Muslim countries are trying to force through the United Nations to get Western countries to criminalize the defamation of Islam, to bring in new blasphemy laws, really. The kind of thing that Maclean's magazine was put through by the BC Human Rights Tribunal for publishing an essay by Mark Steyn about radical Islam back in 2007. You're seeing it already. I told you last week how France charged more than 50 people with promoting terrorism, but they included, for example, this oafish comedian, Dieudonné, who simply made a Facebook post saying he felt like Charlie Koulibaly, taking the first word Charlie and adding the last name of the terrorist who killed 4 Jews in Paris. Is that offensive? Of course it is. Is it anti-Semitic? Yes, I proved that to you last week. Dieudonné is deeply anti-Semitic. But seriously, arresting and charging someone with a crime for saying something dumb but harmless on Facebook? Yeah, welcome to the West's clueless, self-destructive, unprincipled response to violent censorship, namely to bring in legal censorship. But let me talk about one more thing today. And I think it's important too. What was it that got the mayor of France so upset? What exactly did Fox do or say wrong? I'll tell you about that after the break. So the mayor of Paris wants to sue Fox News Channel in the United States for libel. But what did Fox do wrong exactly? Well, it was a couple of guests that Fox interviewed on TV. They said that there were no-go zones in France. And one Fox pundit also said the same thing was true about a city in the UK. Here's the one about France.
These places are basically countries within a country where law enforcement doesn't go, and the culture is one completely separate from mainstream French society. It would shock a lot of Americans to know that in a 10-minute cab ride from the Eiffel Tower, you can be walking through streets that feel like Baghdad.
Well, is that true or not? Fox actually issued an apology for that, sort of. Here, listen to the apology.
A correction now. Over the course of this last week, we have made some regrettable errors on air regarding the Muslim population in Europe, particularly with regard to England and France. Now, this applies especially to discussions of so-called no-go zones, areas where non-Muslims allegedly aren't allowed in and police supposedly won't go. To be clear, there is no formal designation of these zones in either country and no credible information to support the assertion there are specific areas in these countries that exclude individuals based solely on their religion. There are certainly areas of high crime in Europe, as there are in the United States and other countries, where police and visitors enter with caution. We deeply regret the errors and apologize to any and all who may have taken offense, including the people of France and England.
Now, you notice that apology wasn't quite exactly on point with what was said, but close enough, right? So is it true that France doesn't have any no-go zones where French secular authority is weak, the rule of the mob reigns, and that mob is dominated by unassimilated immigrants, especially Muslims? Well, it sounds like the mayor of Paris sure doesn't think so. She's willing to sue over it, which seems a touch defensive, come to think of it. And this left-wing TV show in France mocked Fox. And a version with English captions has been making the rounds on American liberal websites. Here, they start by mocking Fox. I want to show you this video. I'm all for mocking other media, by the way. It's a bit of a hobby of mine, but take a look at this.
Nos doutes sur la véracité des propos de ce spécialiste sont apparus quand Barbie et Ken, le spécialiste de la France, nous ont sorti le sondage.
16% of French people had a favorable view of ISIS, and among those aged 18 to 24, 27%. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's shocking, and it's scary that 16% of the French population would support a group who's made their brand with beheading U.S. journalists.
Mais oui, un quart des jeunes Français ont une bonne opinion des décapitations des journalistes par Daesh, mais oui. Alors ce sondage traîne en effet sur le net et il a été fact-checké et totalement dénoncé par le Washington Post. Mais avions-nous besoin de cette info?
All right, it's lots of fun to make fun of Fox, but did Fox get that wrong? An opinion poll showing that 1 out of 6 Frenchmen support the Islamic State terrorist group and that more than 1 in 4 young Frenchmen do. The French TV station there said that it was false, that it had been debunked by the Washington Post. Well, I tracked down the original poll. It was taken by ICM, a large and reputable British pollster that publishes all of its methodology online. More than 1,000 phone interviews in France, a mix of landlines and cell phones, etc. Very serious poll. And even the liberal magazine Newsweek did a big story on the poll. So I tracked down the Washington Post article that French TV host said completely denounced the poll. But the Washington Post didn't denounce it. They said they were surprised by the results. They said they found it hard to believe. They called it implausible. But that's all a comment on their own preconceptions, not on the poll's quality. They consulted their own polling expert who told them that the poll's methodology, and I quote, isn't perfect, but it isn't terrible. Look, the Washington Post just didn't want to believe it. Can you blame them? Of course not. Leftists across the West don't want to believe that multiculturalism or unassimilated immigration doesn't work, just like the leftists in France don't want to believe it either, even after the terrorist attacks last few weeks ago. You just had a 3-day shooting rampage through Paris, and they're not just in denial, they're lashing out at those who are trying to identify the problem. Problem? What problem? We'll sue you if you say we have a problem. But here, let me show you the response to the no-go zone thing. Look.
Bref, on retourne sur Fox News et on n'a plus eu aucun doute sur la crédibilité des deux Charlots de Fox quand on a vu une carte de Paris avec des quartiers interdits. Pour vous qui connaissez Paris, voici la carte que les Américains ont vue. Les zones interdites à Paris. Vous avez tout le quartier au sud du boulevard Magenta et la place de la République, interdit d'accès. Ou encore ici le quartier de Belleville à côté du Père-Lachaise, trop dangereux pour y aller. Je vois que certains ici connaissent Paris. Alors on ne dit pas que certaines zones ne sont pas sensibles. Non mais Magenta les gars, wow! Bref. Pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas Paris, on a envoyé notre équipe quadriller les quartiers interdits de la capitale. Selon Fox News, heureusement, ils avaient des casques. Voici les zones interdites de Fox News.
Vous le définiriez comment ce quartier?
Quartier pas cher, sympathique, c'est tout, vraiment. Moi, je fais mes courses ici.
On a à Belleville, il y a des juifs, il y a des arabes, il y a des chinois, il y a des chrétiens, il y a des athées, il y a tout.
Est-ce que vous avez déjà vu des jeunes avec des t-shirts Ben Laden dans le quartier?
Non, non. PSG, Marseille, oui.
Est-ce que c'est un quartier qu'on pourrait comparer à l'Irak ou l'Afghanistan?
That's pretty funny. The clip has been watched more than 400,000 times. And it's proof, isn't it, of two things. First of all, that Fox has no idea what it's talking about. And second, that there is no Muslim radicalism problem in France. At least not any no-go zones, at least not the ones on the map that Fox used. So we're done, right? I mean, Fox screwed up. They apologized. The mayor wants to sue anyways. And leftist hacks support that. So it's settled. Except, what about this? Can I show you just one more thing before I go today? What about this? A statement made by Manuel Valls, the Prime Minister of France. He's a member of the same party as the mayor. They're both in the Socialist Party. But here's what he said.
Les émeutes de 2005, qui aujourd'hui s'en rappellent? Et pourtant, stigmates sont toujours présentes. La relégation périurbaine, les ghettos, ce que j'évoquais en 2005 déjà, un apartheid territorial, social, ethnique qui s'est imposé à notre pays.
Whoa, social, ethnic, and territorial apartheid? Apartheid, seriously? As in like South Africa? Let's hear that again. Did I miss that?
Les émeutes de 2005, qui aujourd'hui s'en rappellent? Et pourtant, stigmates sont toujours présentes. La relégation périurbaine, les ghettos, ce que j'évoquais en 2005 déjà, un apartheid territorial, social, ethnique qui s'est imposé à notre pays.
Boy, that's not quite the same as a no-go zone, but it's pretty close, isn't it? Should the hipsters of that French TV show, Le Petit Journal, mock the French Prime Minister too? Should his fellow Socialist Party member, Anne Hidalgo, the Paris mayor, should she sue him too? I mean, apartheid is a pretty loaded word. What did he mean? Didn't he see the video on Le Petit Journal? Didn't he see the bustling streets, the happy coffee shops, the successful multicultural metropolis? I mean, you saw Paris. It looked great. What on earth could the French Prime Minister have meant? Apartheid? And he said it just yesterday. Well, hang on. Maybe I'm not done yet today after all. Come back, and I'll show you some video that Le Petit Journal didn't put on their comedy show. Things they glossed over, like they glossed over that poll of young people who support the Islamic State. Come back, and I'll show you the word that they do use in France. It's true, they don't say no-go zone. The Le Petit Journal is right on that. They don't say no-go zone because they don't speak English over there. They speak French. They say something different in France, and it's even worse. And I'll prove it to you after the break. So over the past week, a couple of guests on Fox News talked about no-go zones in France. And another guest said the same about a British city called Birmingham, saying it was all Muslim. Now, Birmingham is not an all-Muslim city. It's 25% Muslim now, and that grows by about 1% per year. So Fox apologized. Leftists in Europe and U.S. and Canada laughed at Fox. The mayor of Paris threatened to sue and censor. And David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK, felt moved to weigh in on the matter, too. Here's what he said. He said, quote, "When I heard this, frankly, I choked on my porridge, and I thought it must be April Fool's Day. This guy's clearly a complete idiot." Look, there aren't a lot of 100% Muslim cities in the world, Well, there are some. I mean, speaking of apartheid, that's actually the official policy of Saudi Arabia, the world's largest financier of jihadist terrorism. Here's an actual highway traffic sign that discriminates by religion. Do you see that? But back to Europe and the no-go zones there. Look, I'm not going to quote to you from, what do those French leftists call them? Ken and Barbie from Fox, because, you know, racism, whatever. So let's talk to someone who is not racist. Here's a fellow named Darkus Howe, born in Trinidad, moved to the UK, got involved with race relations decades ago, edited a magazine called Race Today in the 1970s. What does he say about Birmingham and race and religion? Well, he made a whole documentary film about it 11 years ago, when the Muslim population there was about half of what it is today. I want to show you a few parts of his movie. Darkus is obviously no racist. He's no Fox News conservative. What does he have to say about Birmingham? Is it a no-go zone now? How about 11 years ago when he made his documentary?
My journey takes me to the Alum Rock Road in Birmingham for Eid, the end of Ramadan, the Muslim month of fasting. But underlying the celebrations of this religious festival is a tense atmosphere. Outsiders feel threatened.
I'm there over half an hour and the traffic coming down. All of you, I try to get you. They go to the car, they go on the hog, and they turn the car across the road, block the road. I can't get you. All they do, though, they start to jump on my car. I start to shake my car up. So I comes out, I pull the car up, and I comes out the car. Right? They all get around me, so I stand there, because I know I'm not running, because they all get around me, like they want to throw me or whatever. I still stand. Agents, all agents. Right, it's all agents.
It's not even the point. Everyone can have a happy Christmas, you understand? But in situations like this, they shouldn't need to block up the road. Muslims got a tracheostomy, and we need to get through the crowds in emergency. He's been coughing for about 45 minutes, and they're not letting them through the crowds.
So Asians, that's what they call Muslims in Birmingham, were pushing out blacks. The movie talks a lot about anti-black racism from Muslims, from Pakistanis. It interviews young blacks who were beat up by Muslims. Well, Darkus himself goes out with some Muslim TV producers to talk to a couple of young Pakistani Brits to try to find some common ground. I mean, he's a big man, an honest man, a man who naturally sympathizes with the underdog. Well, how did his meeting go? Well, pretty bad, pretty quickly. The Muslims started harassing him, and so he called it quits and walked away, but the Muslims didn't just let him walk away.
Smash him up. Mash him up, man, you know what I mean? Mash them all up. So now you got your camera crew, yeah? Raise up all your cameras, man. You know that, man.
They're threatening me. These Pakistani boys are threatening to mash me up. I don't want any trouble, so I leave my Asian director to continue. Zahid and Sharjah and their friends talk big but act like little boys under siege.
Well, Darkus left his Muslim director to talk to the Muslim street toughs. Here, let's listen to how that went. And remember, this was back in 2004.
The terrorists, man, you know what I mean? To divide and conquer, man. They're trying to make us fight against each other, man. But that shit ain't happening, man, because the Muslim brothers all over the world are waking up, man. When the shit gets dark, man, you know what I mean? There's only one firm, man, one firm. Nobody gonna with us, man, you know what I mean? We're not terrorists or nothing, man, you know what I mean? Islam's about peace, man, you get me?
Yeah, man, it's all about the 9/11.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's for Bush. That's for Bush, the mother Bush.
Zahid has a picture of Osama bin Laden on his phone. Maybe it's a joke, I don't know. Global politics, ancient conflicts between Muslims and Jews in the Middle East are unleashing a torrent of vitriol on British streets.
I don't like Jews. If I had a chance, yeah, I'd do one over and I fuck him up. I break him, man. Jews, enemies, man, enemies. Israel, the mother. Woof. Yeah, yes. Oi, why do we hate Jews? Yeah. Jews smell the mother. That's right, innit? Scotters, man, mother.
So it's true. Birmingham is not a 100% Muslim city. No place outside the Muslim world is. Birmingham is not a no-go zone. Darkus went there, and he's not Muslim. But if you were a Jew, would you walk on those streets at night? Sure, the cops go by from time to time. Did it feel safe to you, though? Did you like that cell phone picture of Osama bin Laden? Hey, do you think it's better or worse now in 2015 compared to 2004? No, those were just the street toughs. But how about the reputable people in town, say at the public schools, the principals there? What are those places like? Yeah, well, about that.
Storm clouds are gathering over the school at the centre of the alleged Trojan horse plot. Parkview Academy is among 5 schools in Birmingham that have now been placed into special measures, following evidence of an organised campaign to target certain schools and impose strict Muslim beliefs.
In the most serious cases, a culture of fear and intimidation has taken grip since the schools were last inspected. We found evidence that some head teachers, including those with a proud record of raising standards, have been marginalised or forced out of their jobs.
This former member of staff at Parkview says pupils were given a worksheet saying a woman should always obey her husband.
The message being given in this science class, in this sex education class, is that a woman must sleep with her husband no matter what, and that to me is just horrific and should not be in a science class. It should not be in any class in a school, especially in a secular state school.
Some would say the school is 99% Muslim pupils, so it's fair that the atmosphere in the school and the teaching reflects that. What would you say to that?
Then the school should apply to be a faith school if they want to have these type of things being taught in a classroom.
So is Birmingham a no-go zone? Well, not really. Well, except if you're a female teacher, a Christian teacher at a school that's part of this Sharia plan. The whole city's only 25% Muslim. That's almost as Muslim as, say, Ethiopia is, if you're counting. Here's Muslim prayers in a public park called Small Heath Park. It's not a no-go zone. I mean, it's not like you're banned from going to that park if you're non-Muslim, but would you? I mean, let me ask it differently. I note that in that park prayer of about 2,000 men, I didn't see a single woman. Forget no-go zones for non-Muslims. How about no-go zones for women of any religion? That's a public park. Is Birmingham a gender apartheid city? Well, not 100%, right? It's tough to talk about these things if you're white or Christian because you get called racist or Islamophobic or whatever. That's why I'm quoting people like Darkus Howe. Or say the Pakistani-born Bishop Michael Nazir Ali, who said this in 2008, 7 years ago now.
Arguing that some British streets have become off-limits to non-Muslims may be a view associated with the far right. But when a Pakistani-born Anglican bishop publicly agrees, it reopens the debate. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Michael Nazir Ali says the effect of multiculturalism has been to turn already separate communities into no-go areas. And those of a different faith or race may find it difficult to live or work there because of hostility to them.
Well, he's Pakistani, so I guess he's allowed to say that. No-go zones. Again, I don't think he means it's illegal to go there, like it is in parts of Saudi Arabia. It's just that you'll be driven out in big ways or small ways, whether it's violence or harassment, like with those street thugs, or just a lack of integration. I mean, just in terms of real life, real people, normal people, when you're walking around with your face covered in a mask, you're not going to integrate. You're not going to make friends. It's not normal. That's not how normal people are. Human beings want to see each other, look at each other's faces, feel the sun and wind on our own faces. It's not normal to not want that, but that's the UK. The UK is sensitive. You can see by David Cameron's thin-skinned comments. They've already had their Paris attacks. They had them on July 7th, 2005. They call it 7/7 over there. That's their 9/11, where 52 people were murdered and 700 injured in subway bombings in London. But like France, they haven't done anything to change their immigration or their hate mosques. I mean, you've seen the kind of hate preachers they have it over there, like Anjem Chowdhury. They're as bad as ever, with extremists growing in number. There are more UK Muslims fighting with the Islamic State as terrorists than fight in the UK Army itself. That's a fact. I don't know if there are no-go zones in the UK. I mean, radical Muslims are trying to set them up, putting up signs saying that Sharia law is the law of the streets. I mean, that has a chilling effect. You wouldn't want to be a woman dressed in a skirt walking through there. You wouldn't want to be a Jew or a Sikh wearing anything religiously identifiable, but it's worse than just an area some people avoid. After the break, I'll tell you who else doesn't want to go near these areas. Stay with us. We've established that there are cities in the UK, like Birmingham, where radical Muslims are trying to impose Sharia law, where they're pushing out non-Muslims, and where a woman dressed in a skirt or a Jew wearing a yarmulke would avoid. But it can be more aggressive than that, because there are Muslim street patrols, little thugs that go around enforcing Sharia law. No-go zones? You tell me.
Islam is here in London. Mr. David Cameron, Mr. Police Officer, whether you like it or not, we are commanding good and forbidding evil on this Saturday night. While the police, they try to get us through the media, we will command good and forbid evil. We are Muslim Patrol, and you will never get us. Look how far you can go to hell. This is not a Christian country. Christianity could go to hell. Isa alayhi salam was a messenger of Allah. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi was a messenger of Allah. Allahu Akbar. Islam is here in London.
Later on in the video, they show that they've taken custody of a man who was drunk, breaking the Sharia ban on alcohol. Look, some of these Muslim street patrol thugs have actually been arrested and jailed. But again, you tell me, is that a no-go zone for you? The cops still have the courage to go there. They obviously arrested these thugs. But how about you? Or your daughters? But look, the UK's Muslim population is only about 5 or 6 or 7% of the total population. In France, depending on which statistics you believe, it's 2 or 3 times that proportion. So what's it like in the ghettos? What did Fox News mean by French no-go zones and those maps that were ridiculed on Le Petit Journal? Those maps seemed pretty specific. Well, those Fox zones were special government zones, to be sure, but they're not no-go zones. The French government has a list of zones they call sensitive urban zones, but it's an economic thing. They're pretty much perpetually depressed, unemployed zones. There's a high correlation between them and immigrant communities, which in France, of course, usually means Muslim communities, but they're not police zones. They're economic zones. We've got those in Canada, too. We have whole government departments for them with names like the Atlantic Development Agency or whatever they're called these days. In 2012 in France, they also declared something called priority security zones. Basically, perpetual crime wave areas that the police now target as problem areas. Again, that wasn't done expressly for Islam, although given the demographics of where the crime is, there is a high overlap. Now, don't take it from white racists. How about take it from, say, I don't know, the daughter of Algerian immigrants to France? A young woman named Samira Belil. She wrote about Muslim gang rape in the suburbs of Paris. Those gang rapes have their own word, tournants, roughly translated as pass-arounds, as in Muslim gangs would pass around girls again and again to rape and rape and rape. Samira knew something about this because it first happened to her at age 14. She wrote a book about it called Dans l'enfer des tournants, in the hell of pass-around gang rapes. That was 13 years ago now. So are those priority security zones, are they no-go zones? Well, for Samira Belil or other women not modestly dressed in a niqab who get passed around, of course they're no-go zones. Well, how about this Muslim immigrant to France? This guy's written a book about it. He doesn't use the word no-go zones or apartheid. He calls it anti-French racism.
And this situation is like a ticking time bomb. The jobless migrant population is getting more aggressive towards the native French, which they believe to be the main cause of their troubles. This is described as anti-white racism, says Tariq Yildiz, who wrote a book about the phenomenon.
There is real lack of authority in those troubled suburbs. There is not enough police force. Criminals are not immediately punished. This phenomenon is widely spread among young people at middle school. It's mostly insulting people. A lot of insults can happen at school, at your district, as a conflict between neighbors. Sometimes it ends up in a fight.
But often it goes beyond verbal abuse. The recent murder of a French teenager by his Arabic schoolmates is just one example. A newspaper poll suggested that the white French population in Parisian slums were afraid to take a metro ride home after dark.
What do you think? Would you want to ride on that subway at night? Would you let your kids? I suppose it would be like asking if in the 1970s the Bronx in New York was a no-go zone. And I think the answer would be, well, sort of. And there would have been a racial element to it, sure, but not the us versus them energy and focus and ideology of the jihad, not the self-identity of so many French Muslims as having no loyalty to France itself, like these people.
Et donc si la France joue contre l'Algérie, vous soutiendrez qui?
La question est évitée normalement. Très sincèrement, je serais pour l'Algérie à 200%, mais après le match, je ne casserai pas des vitrines. Voilà.
Car il y a 4 jours, Marseille s'enflammait après la défaite de l'Algérie face à l'Égypte au Caire. Des violences provoquées par une rivalité entre communautés algériennes et égyptiennes.
So a riot. Yeah, we know that Canadian sports fans can riot, or at least they did so once in recent memory in Vancouver. But that was drunkenness and a few black bloc anarchists. That wasn't a religious or race war expressing itself in city streets. It's not even rare anymore to have riots in French streets. It's not even news anymore. Every night, cars are set on fire. They're just torched. It's a special New Year's Eve tradition in France now. Literally more than 1,000 cars torched on any given New Year's Eve. Everyone was really excited this year as the number fell below 1,000. 20 people were injured, though. Most media, of course, said it was just enthusiastic revelers. Seriously, that's the word that both Time and Newsweek used. Revelers. It's just all the time, though. I mean, is this a no-go zone? I don't know. I mean, sometimes revelers, fight back against firemen to stop them from coming in to put out the blazes. So I guess that would be a no-go zone for firemen, at least. These no-go zones are not all part of the jihad. Radical Islam is just being opportunistic, using these desperate ghettos as an incubator, a place to recruit desperate men. Don't go away. After the break, I'll tell you what else is behind these no-go zones. Look, I'm not saying all of this violence and trouble is part of the jihad. There is an overlap of dysfunction here. New immigrants with high unemployment and a weak economy to begin with, and criminal gangs and the lure of illicit trafficking of drugs and guns. And I'm not saying the French are exactly the sweetest people in the world when it comes to welcoming minorities, especially minorities from their former colonies either. I'm just telling you what it's like as far as I can tell. I'm just trying to answer the question, are there no-go zones in France? I mean, take this castle, a modern-day castle run by immigrant gangs, not jihadist gangs, as far as I can see, drug gangs. But of course, many, if not most of the immigrants there would be Muslim anyways. Maybe they're moderate. Maybe they'd be radical. God knows there's enough despair in there to make them radical. But the question is it a no-go zone? Here's a British reporter describing what he saw in Marseille.
The infamous La Castellane, which is on the motorway. The new route has come about because the young people on the estates are trying to cut out the established traffickers. Many of them have family connections in North Africa, where the cannabis is grown and pressed. Getting into these estates is difficult. So I'm meeting up with a local youth worker called Dika on a hillside overlooking La Castellane.
So it's called Castellane, but effectively it's a castle, hein?
C'est vrai qu'on a l'impression que c'est une forteresse avec une muraille tout autour et des personnes qui guettent dans des toits, qui scrutent la cité. Ils sont tellement paranoïaques, les minots, que tout le monde protège son bien.
But not everybody, there's some 8,000 people guesstimate, not everybody can be involved in the drugs trade, surely.
Il n'y a pas que des vendeurs de drogue, il y en a plein qui veulent s'en sortir. On est tellement renfermés qu'on a du mal à sortir de cette cité.
If you look carefully, you can see that on the 8 entrances into it, there are lookouts, and those lookouts are there 24/7. They have 2 jobs: look out for the police, and also look out for prospective clients that will come in there and actually buy drugs. The fact is that the model of Castellan has been repeated all over Marseille. There are lots of estates that are basically no-go areas. You can't get into them if you're a policeman, not unless you go in numbers. You certainly can't get into them if you're in the media. This is a tight-knit community, and clearly the police are not popular.
This is a dog car, yeah? And as it arrived, someone just, what? Big stone, yeah?
Aussi sur la tête. C'est quelque chose d'assez fréquent, ouais.
Not a word about Islam, though they did mention North Africa. Lots of words about unemployment and desperation, about no way out. Or maybe from an immigrant's point of view, no way in to normal French society. But you heard the man, a no-go zone, an 8,000-person compound where cops go in only if they're dressed in SWAT team armor, and kids and adults alike throw rocks at them without fear. Rocks. Well, it's not always rocks. Sometimes it's guns. And sometimes the cops, well, they run for their lives.
Forteresse où il est difficile de s'infiltrer. Au moindre dérapage, la poudrière s'embrase.
Yeah, I'm going to call that a no-go zone. That's a drug gang unemployed in the banlieues, the immigrant suburbs. You wouldn't want to park your car there on New Year's Eve. You wouldn't want to be a young woman walking through there. You might be raped in a tournant. Were they Muslim? I don't know. Most French immigrants are. They didn't look too pious to me. But plenty of Muslim fundamentalists find no contradiction with selling drugs. That's long been a profit center for Afghanistan's Taliban. But here's the thing. If you have 8 or 10 or 12 million Muslims in France, many of whom are poor immigrants, unemployed, unassimilated, what percent of them would join the jihad? A tragic number will fall into other dysfunctional lifestyles, crime, despair, trafficking. But what percent will become radical Muslims who want to blow people up? Well, why do people join gangs in the first place? Why do young men do that? Well, for protection, for a sense of community and brotherhood and camaraderie, for a purpose in life? Well, the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda can trump any petty street gang when it comes to those attributes. You like throwing rocks at cops? Well, how about shooting an AK-47 at them? Do you despair? Do you hate the world? Well, indulge your anger by killing some infidels. That might actually look pretty inspiring if you're in a rundown, squalid housing project in Marseille or the outskirts of Paris. It might look confident and free and adventurous and powerful to join the Islamic State, and plenty of sex in the Islamic State too. They have rape slavery for women and girls they capture. I showed you the poll that a quarter of young people in France sympathize with the Islamic State. Even if that number is very wrong, even if the number is only 2.5%, and if only 2.5% of that 2.5% would put their hate into action, well, that's still thousands of men. And in fact, French authorities count more than 1,100 young men who have gone to join the Islamic State over in Iraq. So why is the mayor of Paris so offended by Fox News reporting on these no-go zones? Well, don't go away. More Source after the break. So let me end the show today as I began it, with the latest disgraceful news out of France that the mayor of Je suis Charlie Paris wants to sue Fox News for insulting Paris over no-go zones. What a thug. The instinct to censor instead of to rebut or debate or just to plain ignore. Who knew that the mayor of one of the world's greatest cities was so thin-skinned? But put aside the mayor's fascist instincts and tell me, do you think Fox News was right or wrong about no-go zones in France and Birmingham, UK? Do you think they're wrong? Or maybe other than perhaps some imprecise language, do you think they were actually spot on? And that's the reason why the mayor of France and leftists from Paris to London and here in North America are freaking out. Well, let's give the last word to France's most popular politician, Marine Le Pen, the only leader in France talking about filtering out jihadist immigration and cracking down on hate mosques. She's not politically correct. She's not going to bend herself into pretzels trying to ignore reality. Does she think France has no-go zones? What does she have to say? And how many times can she say it in 26 seconds?
La sécurité dans les zones de non-droit soit retrouvée. Ça veut dire qu'il faut que la police rentre à nouveau dans les zones de non-droit. Il faut que les renseignements rentrent dans les zones de non-droit.
Et comment on fait?
Les renseignements n'y sont plus, mais monsieur parle des méthodes tout à fait classiques qui sont celles du renseignement, l'infiltration. Or, ça n'est plus le cas aujourd'hui. La police, la gendarmerie, le renseignement se sont retirés de ces zones de non-droit. Eh bien, dans ces zones de non-droit, l'islamisme radical pullule.
I think I counted her saying a phrase 5 times there in 26 seconds. She didn't call it a no-go zone. She called it a zone de non-droit, a zone with no law, a lawlessness zone. Not a no-go zone, a lawless zone. Oh, you can go there, like Samira Belil did, or the SWAT team did, or the anti-drug team did, or Darcus Howe did in Birmingham. You can go there. Just don't expect it to be like the rest of France or Britain. You know that blowhard mayor of Paris? She'll never sue Fox for defamation, for saying there are no-go zones in France. You know why? Because truth is a defense. What do you think of the show today? What do you think? Do you think Fox got it wrong, or was it just a matter of precise wording? Do you think they apologized too quickly? Do you think the mayor of Paris and even the Prime Minister of the UK are protesting a bit too much? Do you think the facts that I've shown you, just grabbing a few of the hundreds of documentaries and news stories that are shown in Europe all the time about these no-go zones, do you think they're more persuasive than the politically correct censorship? I think that there are real challenges in Europe, and we're starting to see them trickle into Canada too. We're starting to see polygamous marriages in Canada. We're seeing honor killings in Canada, and we've seen jihadist attacks, even on our Parliament Hill. But what do you think? I'd like you to tell me what you think. Send me an email to thesource@sunmedia.ca. Tell me what you think about Europe, and tell me what you think might happen here in Canada. I'm Ezra Levant. Stay safe.